Welcome everybody to this fourth, I think, YouTube video. Today we're gonna do something different. My name is Leonard, better known as Lenny Crafted, and we're gonna show you how I paint my metallics on my Fire Angel Space Marines. It's I call it weathered metallics because the metal is all browny and stuff. And I'm gonna show you how it's done. It's pretty easy. So let me switch to my camera and show you what we're gonna do today. So the idea is we're gonna paint this fire angels, and they are really cool. I don't see the camera working, so probably the wrong screen. And there we go. And this is a good screen. Okay, so this is what we are going to paint. So I'm working out my stream, doing this whole live shows, and I really wanna up my game and show you some different. I've done a lot of upgrades in my program I used. So we're gonna switch from screens and stuff. So this is one of my fire angels. He's yeah, I really like him. These pictures are doing very good on Instagram. And what I'm gonna show you today is how I do the silver. So it will not be like the red desert effect that you see between the edges on the boots, for example. But I'm going to just show you how I do the first layers of the metallic, and probably gonna do a whole mini series on how I paint these minis. So this is one, and I also have a sergeant here who has like, I really like to do red arms and more red. It's like the higher in rank the marine is, the more red they have on their armor. So he has one red arm and has a red face mask and stuff. So yeah, and the purity seal, if you want to know how I did that, is already on YouTube. And show you another one of the other guys of the Battle Brothers. So let's explain the technique. I use like this really easy step of three colors of metal. We start with Leadbelcher, then Iron Fang, and then Runfang Steel. And I also have the old school colors. So if you use old school colors, it's bolt gun metal, chainmail, and mithril silver. But it will be down in the description if you look for the colors. The base coat is just spray or Abaddon Black. Then you paint them silver. And after you paint them then silver, you do just Agrax Earthshade all over the model. And then that's already the biggest effect. And when that's done, we're gonna highlight it. So let's go to the movie. And the idea is for the people that are watching live now, you can ask me any question, and I will share it with you. So we go to full screen mode, and I will put this on full screen, play the movie. And so what we see here is me showing you the first step. I just painted the whole mini black, and then I just painted it with Leadbelcher. What's really important is that you don't paint the other silver parts on, for example, the gun. So I point out the parts you don't want to paint. So on the chain sword and on the bolt gun, there are parts you don't want to shade with Agrax Earthshade. So the brush I use is this really thick brush for shading. I really like the thicker brushes, but they need to have a good tip. So I really like this one. This is my favorite. I used it for many years. And then I talk about the color. So you have like the darker silver, the mid-tone silver, and the light silver. So they're three tones, and they will be in the description down the bottom. So we're going to use Agrax Earthshade to shade them. And I'm going to get my brush ready, get the paint ready, shake the paint, of course. Always it's really important that you shake your shades. because if you don't do it, the effect will be really weird. It's really a mixture of different kind of inks and paints. And I always start at the back. And as you can see, you can do it really rough. You don't need to like, yeah, you can just pile it all over, but you don't want it to do it too rough. So you really need to try to paint it on. And I always like to get some new paint for every like 3 big parts. So, and that's what I really like about the brush, because if it has a good tip, you can still really paint the shade on. So this is where it goes wrong for many people. Like I see a lot of new painters and guys that are just starting out, and they pile this shade all over the mini, and then it becomes so strong color, or it becomes too thick, or there you see these drops on the model that dried there. And by using like a big brush, that will make sure the paint spreads nice over the mini. And also make sure you paint it panel by panel, like part for part. And now you see that I point out that you don't paint the other silver parts. So you really need to make sure you only paint the armor with the shade, and don't paint because that's also what you see a lot of people do. Like they have this sword and a shield and the armor of a knight, for example, or for a space marine that has a sword and a shield, and they use the same shade all over the mini, but it's so easy to just switch your shade. So for example, just non-oil and Agrax Earthshade, and then it will have a totally different effect on the same color of metallic. And that's so important to make this color difference, and then you get the effect, like you really see, oh, there's a difference between the metal from the gun and the metal from the armor, or of the sword or the shield. And actually, in one of my last last models, I really did a lot of different effects. So now that the shading is done, and I grab another mini, because of the dry time, I always use 2 examples, and then I have one version that's already dried out, and I have one version that's not. I painted this mini. I already did some details on this mini for a painting tutorial on my Instagram, so the chainsword is already painted up. But as you can see here, you can really see the difference between metal. So the metal of the gun and the metal of the sword is really different than that of the armor, and you can already see the effect going on there. And when you paint in later, like the red or the other colors that I use for this color scheme, you can see even more difference between the parts. So I use and Houston and what's called like the Winston and Newton Series 7 brushes. I really like them, especially the Zero. And what we're first gonna do, we're gonna highlight all the edges of the armor. I always mix my paints with some water. So on my palette, it's a wet palette. You will see I grabbed some water and I put it on the paint. And we're just gonna paint all the edges. It's really, for this first step, we use the same color as the base coat. And because it's shaded, you still see a color difference. And actually on most of all my techniques I use, this is one that I use the most. Yeah, it's the most common. You get a base color, block in the colors, and this can be done on any surface. Shade it with a darker color, and then use the same color as a highlight. And that's really one of the most nice effects you can get. And you see me here, going on the round parts. And what is really important with highlighting is that you think of where would the sun be, where would the sun shine on this part. And like for a lot of guys that do like non-metallic colors, or that are really professional painting, they even get one corner of the Mini where the sun is shining on it. I don't use that often, especially not for tabletop minis like this one. This is just for my army, and I just make sure uh, like the sun comes from every direction, like it's 12 o'clock. And yeah, what's good to see here is what are the important parts of Space Marines to highlight. So I did like all the underleg and the feet, and then you have all these nice edges. Like Primera Space Marines are really easy to highlight. I think they put a lot of thought in it, if how they designed the model and make sure that there are a lot of nice lines that are really easy to shade. Also, there are a lot of points where you can just hold your brush sideways and just highlight with the side of your brush, and it makes it so much easier. Yeah, we will see a couple of moments. So, for example, here I painted with like with the tip of the brush, but I also use a lot of the side of the brush. So for example here you can see it perfectly. So this edge is pretty sharp of the elbow, and you can see I just paint with the side of the brush, not even the tip. And that's really easy. I mean, of course you need to learn brush control and you need to get better over time, but this really works. Also in the fingers they're really nice edges, really easy to highlight. You saw there even I just made a stripe all over the fingers, highlighting every one in just one stroke. So I will not be doing the whole mini because that will be like a lot of time only watching me highlighting with one color, and that's pretty boring, I think. The idea is, of course, I show you how I do some of the highlights. So at the back it's even more easy to highlight. So I will show you some parts where I again hold it down. And we got maybe a question. Yeah, it is really hard to paint with the tip, and you really need the brush control. And Chris, this takes just time. You just need to do it a lot, and you will get better at it. And the most important is that your brush is wet. That the stroke that you do does exactly what you're doing. Because if the paint is dry, it also is really random when the paint goes off the brush to the mini. And the wetter the paint, the more easy it comes from the brush to the mini you're painting. The problem there is, of course, when it's too wet, it will make a drop of water and paint and just goes on the miniature, and you get an effect you don't really want. So the first thing to make sure your paint is good is make a good mixture of water and paint. And this just takes experience, because there's also a lot of difference between how wet people paint. So I know a guy who is like a really good painter, and he really wettens his paint so wet I could not even paint with it. But he still has the control to make exactly what it was. So here you can see I again really use a lot of the sideways of my. I highlight like all these parts at the same time, just with the side of the brush. Here again, yeah, this is more of just with the tip. Sometimes it's also something in between, like it's not the tip. Yeah, here this is a good example. You really see I highlight two edges, like the edge of the backpack and of the roster under it, and I highlight them at the same time. So, and also here there are really nice edges to highlight. Sometimes it's also just some skill, and this just comes with time. Again, there was two edges at the same time. Well, and then we're gonna do some highlighting on the front of the miniature. So under the belt there's a round area, and then the belt itself. Then like on his abs there are his plates, and then there's a line above that one, and there's another line above that one of the chest. And what I also really like is you can make a lot of mistakes. It doesn't really matter because it's weathered metal, uh, that you make a mistake here and there. And also because we're going to paint in all the other details later, you will fix it up. So now I will just do the other parts later, uh, and we go to the lighter silver. And now it will go really fast. So that's also really what I like about this technique, because now we're gonna do exactly the same highlights, but we're gonna paint like 50% of what we just highlighted. So we make actually a highlight on a highlight. And that's also a technique that I use almost on every miniature. I use it on every miniature for sure, I think. I just make a 50% highlight, and I choose just parts that I don't highlight anymore. So for example, you see here, I just always like to do the sharpest edges. And just the parts that are actually also easiest to reach with your brush. Those are always the best parts to highlight because they're the most upper parts. And here again you see the double highlight, just a double edge in those heel panels, and on his rear, and again, and I just paint 50% of all the highlights I just did. Going now, put some more water and paint. Gonna do the elbow, and then you see I just starts like on 50% and just and some corners, and then go to the next part. And that is actually all there is to it. You really get a nice effect by just highlighting those parts. Gonna do the fingers, the wrist, and again think of where is the sun from. Yeah, exactly. You need to let, like the first highlight you done, you want to let 50% of that highlight still showing. So there will be a lot of part that you just can see the highlight. Uh, and that's because if you highlight your entire miniature like with one highlight that is really like big contrast with the color that's beneath it, it will look really unrealistic. And now I paint like 25% of the same highlights. So we're going to do again the same effect, but now even less highlight, still showing the second highlight we did. And you see, I just tipped the corners. I just tipped the round edges just for a little, really showing like most of the highlights done. And that's also what makes it so fun. It's really fast. You see, I'm like the first step took me like 8 minutes or 9 minutes, then like 4 or 5 minutes, and now it takes me maybe 1 minute to do the last step. Yeah, and that's actually all there's to it. And then the end result is is this mini again. Hey, and if you look my pictures like on my Instagram, you will see like the highlights that I done this way. And we'll also see that they're actually pretty sloppy. They're not like really clean or something. And if I paint, so that was the movie. So if I would paint like a really competitive miniature, I of course I would yeah, I would make sure I put a lot of time in it, and I would even make more highlights. So if you see like a professional space marine, for example, they would do the same technique, but then maybe 6 colors. So they start, for example, with very dark red, going all the way up to light red, orange, and then pink or yellow. And those last colors are just spots, just small tips of paint, and that's how you really make the cool effect. So this was the new style of tutorial. I'm also gonna edit some YouTube videos in the future. And we'll stay a little bit longer on Twitch, but the YouTube people, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Everything is linked in the description, so the paints, my Instagram profile, my Facebook profile, everything you need. And thank you for watching.